In the autumn of 1923, a woman stood shivering and frail against the Arctic winds as the long-awaited rescue ship finally anchored off the shores of Wrangel Island. She was a lone, haunting figure against the bleak and endless ice, her face drawn, eyes hollow, and her clothes, a haphazard collection of furs and patches, hinting at the desperate survival she had endured. But Ada Blackjack was alive. When rescuers stepped onto the ice and saw her, gaunt and solitary, standing like a ghost from a forgotten tale, they could hardly believe their eyes. How could this woman, who had left Alaska as nothing more than a seamstress and cook for an Arctic expedition, now stand alone in this frozen wasteland as its only survivor? This is the story of Ada Blackjack, a tale of unimaginable survival and a mother's fierce love. Ada Blackjack was born Ada DeLutuk on May 10, 1898 in Solomon, Alaska, a small village on the Seward Peninsula. She was of Inupiat descent, a group indigenous to Alaska, and spent her childhood in Nome. Growing up in poverty, Ada led a life filled with challenges from an early age. Her childhood was marked by her parents' death, forcing her into a mission school that distanced her from her culture and traditional survival skills. Despite being Inupiat, she was raised without the full breadth of skills that Inuit people typically gained to survive in extreme Arctic conditions. When Ada was 16, she married an Inupiat man named Jack Blackjack. The marriage was tumultuous and marred by hardship. They had 3 children, but only one, a son named Bennett, survived infancy. Their son's health was precarious. Bennett had tuberculosis, a chronic illness that plagued many in Alaska at the time. After Jack abandoned the family, Ada found herself entirely alone, struggling to care for Bennett. To make ends meet, Ada took up sewing and cleaning work, but the modest income she earned was hardly enough. Desperate, she was forced to place Bennett in an orphanage temporarily, hoping to save enough money to eventually bring him back home and support him. In 1921, Ada heard about a unique opportunity, a job as a cook and seamstress for a high-paying Arctic expedition organized by the Canadian explorer Vilhjalmur Stephenson. The expedition aimed to claim Wrangel Island, a small, desolate landmass north of Siberia, for Canada, with Stephenson's ultimate ambition to populate the Arctic with settlers and explorers. Wrangel Island's strategic position and wildlife had convinced Stephenson that people could thrive there. However, Stephenson would not be going himself. Instead, he appointed a young Canadian, Alan Crawford, as the expedition leader. The team was composed of 4 men: Alan Crawford, the 20-year-old Canadian expedition leader; Lorne Knight, an experienced explorer and miner with knowledge of the Arctic; Fred Maurer, an American who had been to the Arctic before and believed in Stephenson's vision; Milton Galley, another young American who, while enthusiastic, had limited experience. Ada, needing money to regain custody of her son, reluctantly accepted the job despite her fears and misgivings. She was promised $50 a month, a significant sum for her at the time, which she hoped would finally allow her to bring Bennett back into her care. Although Stephenson had assured the crew that the island had abundant resources, including game and fish, the reality would prove far different. The crew arrived on Wrangel Island in September 1921 filled with optimism and confidence. However, as winter descended, the true severity of the island's environment became starkly evident. Wrangel Island, located 85 miles off the Siberian coast, was isolated, desolate, and unyielding. The temperatures dropped dramatically, the winds were relentless, and the days grew shorter, leaving them in near-constant darkness during the winter months. The conditions tested even the most seasoned explorers. Stephenson's claims of an island rich with wildlife turned out to be little more than wishful thinking. While the crew had anticipated hunting seals, polar bears, and birds for sustenance, they quickly found that the local wildlife was scarce, and what animals they did find could hardly sustain the 5 of them. They managed to hunt some seals, but with limited supplies and the crew's inexperience, it wasn't enough to ward off hunger. As food grew scarce, desperation set in. Tragedy struck early in 1922 when one of the men, Lorne Knight, became gravely ill. Knight had developed scurvy, a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C, which had plagued countless Arctic expeditions. Without fresh meat or produce, Knight's body weakened, and he eventually became bedridden. As he grew weaker, Ada found herself shouldering an ever greater burden. Although her role had originally been that of a cook and seamstress, she took on the responsibility of caring for Knight, even though she had no nursing experience. As the men became increasingly dependent on Ada's care, the dynamic of the group shifted. Knight's illness, combined with the others' failure to gather enough resources, left Ada as the expedition's unexpected backbone. She tended to Knight, providing what comfort she could, cooking, cleaning, and even attempting to hunt and trap wildlife. She was becoming adept at skills she had never anticipated needing. As the winter dragged on and food supplies dwindled, the men realized they had no choice but to seek help. In January 1923, Crawford, Maurer, and Gall decided to cross the ice to Siberia, hoping to find help on the mainland. Their journey was treacherous. Crossing icy waters and freezing temperatures with little food was dangerous, and sadly, they were never seen again. The Arctic had claimed them, leaving Ada and the dying Knight alone on the island. For months, Ada did her best to care for Knight, though his condition was beyond what her limited resources and knowledge could cure. He was in constant agony, and by June 1923, he succumbed to the illness, leaving Ada as the expedition's only survivor. Now entirely alone, Ada faced one of the harshest environments on Earth with only her wits, determination, and her memories of Bennett to sustain her. She constructed a small shelter from driftwood and anything she could scavenge. Wrangel Island's isolation, harsh climate, and the ever-present threat of polar bears required her to be constantly vigilant. Each day, Ada scoured the landscape for any source of sustenance, setting traps for Arctic foxes, hunting seals, and fortifying her shelter to keep predators at bay. Her diary entries from this period reveal the depth of her fear, isolation, and yearning for her son. She wrote about her loneliness and her overwhelming worry for Bennett. Yet through it all, her survival instincts and fierce love for her son drove her forward. Ada's ingenuity kept her alive. She crafted tools, maintained her shelter, and stitched her clothes, improvising with materials she had on hand. She showed a resilience that no one had anticipated, using her sewing skills to repair her clothing, creating makeshift footwear, and adapting to her circumstances with remarkable courage. Despite her fear, hunger, and solitude, she endured. In August 1923, nearly 2 years after she first set foot on Wrangel Island, a rescue party finally arrived. When the rescuers reached the camp, they were astounded to find Ada alive, standing before them as the last testament to an ill-fated journey. They were greeted by a solitary figure, a woman they had vastly underestimated, who had outlasted unimaginable odds in the harshest conditions. Ada returned to Alaska, her ordeal over, but her fame was brief and bittersweet. The media initially painted her as a heroine, but Ada never saw herself as such. She received only a portion of the money she had been promised, a disappointing end to the venture she had endured for Bennett's sake. After the rescue, Ada tried to pick up her life again, returning to sewing and struggling with poverty, as she had before the expedition. She rarely spoke of her time on Wrangel Island and lived in quiet anonymity. Ada Blackjack passed away in 1983, a quiet heroine who had triumphed over nature's fiercest challenges. Her legacy stands as a testament to the power of human endurance, love, and the indomitable spirit she carried within her. Ada Blackjack, the female Robinson Crusoe of the Arctic, reminds us that strength often lies in the quietest hearts, and her journey of survival continues to inspire those who learn of her story. Thank you for watching this video. Hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more interesting videos.